Sorry. My doctor said I'm giving you a load good enough for a horse. I said that won't be enough for me because I'm an elephant. So, anyway, after that, I conked off. And just now, my mother told me that you have a class and you have to take another round of medicines. So I said, okay. So we'll get going. Uh, whoever comes will come. Um, I told you that what we will be doing today is the evolution This is all I typed in your this thing, but it should be this fully speaking. Okay. Now, if you look at the parliament, it is not for nothing that the UK has been, not the UK, England um, has been called the mother of all parliaments. That is because uh, the UK is had the first ever parliament in the history of the world. England, not UK, England, or to a certain extent, if you like, you can use this one as well. Great Britain. Though Great Britain happened later, it was either England or Britain. Okay. Um, it was here that the parliament was first established. Now, what one should realize is parliament is this particular spelling that we are seeing. This is, in some people call it Middle English, but it is actually This was the original spelling of medieval. Okay, medieval. This was the original spelling, but now people have taken recourse to or medieval anything. Original spelling of medieval in the medieval period was that Medieval. Okay, that's what uh, it was called. Ah, no, let's try for some time. Akshay, that is very kind of you to say to better take a class tomorrow. Um, Let me just make some attempt in this direction. So let's see how long I can last. And if I can last a bit, then let's see. Yeah, so medieval English. Now you don't have to write that uh, other spelling of medieval, but some people, some purists of the English language continue to use that spelling still. So don't be surprised if you come across that particular spelling. Okay, and it is some people call it Middle English. Uh, that I would dissuade you from using because that would mean that you're saying you're talking about an English that is in the middle. It should be English in the of the Middle Ages. That's what it should be technically, not just Middle English. So if you say Middle English, middle of what? That'll be the question that comes about. But the spelling that we continue to use is the medieval English uh, spelling. You must understand that um, the word parliament uh, comes from the French word parler, which means to speak. Parler is the word in French, which essentially means to speak, and this was translated into parlement. That is the pronunciation. Parlement is um, place where one could s- speak. So that's basically what it is. Parler or parlement. I mean, parler leading to parlement. That is what it is. And what you must understand, I might have mentioned it briefly several times to all of you people. And what I would have mentioned to you is that England, though it became an imperial power later on, it was conquered by number of people. Okay, the first conquerors of both there are two islands there. One is Ireland, if you look at the world map, a little above England or Great Britain is what you would find, or now it's the United Kingdom. You'll find Ireland, and then the other island is what became England, Britain, later on Scotland and Wales. All these things got added on, different names. Okay, and each of them spoke a separate language. Why isn't this cursor staying on? Okay, so the first attackers of the English, or rather the people who lived on the British Isles, as they are called, were the Vikings. And the Vikings are from Sweden, and even today, the most dominating influence in Ireland is still the Viking culture. That is dominant culture. Um and After the Vikings had conquered Ireland and England, it was the Normans, as they were called in those days, and Normans were those who came from Norway, which is today's Norway, uh, and Normans are nowadays called Norwegians, but in those days they were called Normans. Okay, and another set of conquerors over the British Isles were the Gauls or the Frenchmen. Okay, the original name for France was Gaul, Gaul. Okay, and if the original name of France was Gaul, the capital of France, which we today call Paris, or if you're a Frenchman, you'll simply call it Paris. Uh, but you will see that in the old name for Paris or Paris, um, if you want to be like a Frenchman, would be this Lutetia. Okay, it was called Lutetia, and these people also conquered the British, the Gauls, that is. And therefore, you will find one particular language that is still spoken on the British Isles, which is actually now called Gaelic, which has big influences of the French language. Even today, it is spoken on the British Isles. Um, I think it's spoken more in Scotland. So, English, by the way, is not the only language that is spoken in the United Kingdom. They speak in the United Kingdom because a part of the northern, rather the northern tip of the British Isles is Irish population. At one time, they wanted to be different from the rest of Britain. So uh, there was a movement for separation of Northern Ireland. We'll talk about that when we do some international relations. So the Irish speak the Irish language, and then you have the Scots or Scotsmen who speak Gaelic, and the people from Wales, they speak Welsh. Among all these, this is the most interesting language. If you ever have time, try to see if you can find a passage written in Welsh. Typically, it'll be like this. Okay, this is how it is written. I've only, that's not Welsh, by the way. It's just to show you that there is no usage of the vowels A, E, I, O, U. The vowel sound is something that is completely absent from this particular thing. Okay, so they have a language which just doesn't have vowels. But let me use this occasion to clarify one thing. Every vowel, every word which has been called a consonant, okay, which means that which is not a vowel, that which does not have that A, E, I, O, U in it, that letter which has been called a consonant, or a word which has been called a consonant, um, it is untrue that it is not uh, that it is a full consonant. In fact, newer theories of language will tell you that even the consonants are those which have the sound of a vowel in it. For example, how do you read this? Hmm? You read it as T. And what is E? E is a consonant. Okay? Then K. It ends with a consonant sound. Okay? K. It ends with a vowel sound. A. That's what it is sounding. K. Or you can have some letters that begin with a vowel sound. Okay, let me type this in capitals. L, but it is starting with L. So it's perfectly possible to read it as Tekel. That's how the Welsh language is constructed. There is no word as Tekel, but that's how they read their words. Tekel. So if any of you has got some interest in trying to find out about languages, you could do this thing and find out. Okay, because every vowel, uh, people once said that the only every letter which is a consonant has a vowel sound. The only letter that didn't was an exception to this rule was supposed to be um, Z. Okay, we're starting with a consonant sound and ending with um, a consonant sound Z. The vowel sound is contained in the middle, Z, A, that part, right? But the Americans, of course, have made it easy for us now, right? And they call it Z, right? So once you call it Z, then it also has become a pure, it also has developed a vowel sound towards the end. I particularly find it infuriating that when I go to, um, when I basically go to give my motorcycle for servicing, I have to book it in advance. It's an expensive motorcycle. So, the one thing that I indulge in life. So, you have to give them the name if it has, or the model, this thing. I have a Kawasaki and I have a Z series. So, they ask me, what is your model? And I say Z250, and they say, oh, Z250. And I tell them, wait a minute, you're not you're not Americans. Why are you calling it Z? We are Indians. We have always called this Z. So we should be calling it Z. And one day I was given a clarification that all the Japanese companies have given uh, a, they've given a circular to their service personnel that the word, rather the letter Z, has to be pronounced as Z. Okay, for all the thing that we talk about the Japanese, they love the Americans in spite of their having dropped bombs on them. Their biggest markets are America. Market is America, I'm sorry. So they basically talk about this as um Z. Okay, that and so I think a time will come when our youngsters will not know that this was once pronounced Z. Okay, and anyway, to get on with the main thing, I don't know why I have gone into language. Uh, it is parlor, and oh, having talked about this, I forgot to tell you the last of the invaders whose culture it is that we know today are the Anglo Saxons. Anglo comes from the tribe which was called, don't call it Angle, Angla is the title, the tribe, and the area from which they came is called Saxony in English, but it is actually, what am I even typing? It was the Sa Shen. That's how they pronounce it now. But the contention is that German, despite its, uh, what should I say, despite it being a language which is way, way better than, uh, more evolved than other European languages, it was supposed to have contained a lot of guttural sounds, and therefore to uh, soften the sounds, what people started doing is pronouncing the CH as sh rather than pronouncing it as kh. We think it's only in Urdu, Arabic, and Persian that you'll have people saying kh, but that is very much there even in the French and other. These are all Indo European languages, by the way. They belong to the family called the Indo European languages. There is an Indo European language tree, and if you go by that, about 70% of English is Indo. Okay. And from the Indian side, we have languages like Marathi, Punjabi, Bengali, Urdu, Hindi. All these are Indo European languages. The present day Telugu, Kannada, and Malayalam are also uh, Indo European now, but in their origins, uh, Malayalam has always, it's a new language, but Telugu and Kannada in their origins are Dravidian languages, and so they don't belong to the Indo European tree. Technically, they don't. Okay. Uh, and it's a very funny thing, though, that the language that the Angla spoke was called Angla, and it is Angla, which is what Telugus call the language. And Jesus was called Yesu in Hebrew and Yiddish, and Indians call him Yesu. I don't know how that happened. That is in itself something worth researching upon. So the Anglo Saxons were the last people because they are called Anglo Saxons because they have come from the Saxen. It was originally Sachsen region, but now it's called Sachsen. Uh, but anyway, uh, now to come back to the idea of the parliament, I was trying to establish that these languages are not really alien to us. From I have spoken about the languages from the Indian side, but languages from the European side, which are Indo-European, are English, French, German. Um, uh, German is the most Indo-European. of all of them, in most Indo of all these. And then I think even um, uh, Basque is one of the languages um, which is in the Indo European language tree. Basque is spoken in parts of Span in the Spain, but otherwise those languages are kind of different. Anyway, so parler means to speak. Parlement is a place where one could speak. Now there is a peculiar case in England, and the peculiar case that we find in England is that there was some kind of a monarchy, not a real monarchy because this is the medieval period. Okay, and then you have the monarchy or a king under whom were the nobles. Noble. Okay, this once happened to me. Uh, this was when my wife was working in Google. Um, when my wife was working in Google, apparently they were hiring a number of people, and quite a few hires were out of Hyderabad. They were being hired from other places. So these people basically said, so one chap who was hired from Hyderabad, he said, when they asked him, "Where are you from?" He said, "I'm a true blue Hyderabadi." And a lot of these American expatriates, they did not understand what is this true blue. It is something that is so natural to Indians. We say true blue something, true blue this, true blue that. We say all those things. But why has this expression come into being? Okay, why has this expression come into being? True blue. This comes from England or Britain and from the nobles. The nobles who were also called the peers who owned peerages. Okay, you'll say he's of noble birth. That is how you will describe that thing. So, what is a noble birth? The nobles believed that they had blue blood. They actually believe they had blue blood. Now, don't ask me, did they never cut themselves involuntarily and see that their blood was red? Don't ask me that. I can't answer that question. But they believed that they were blue blooded. And that is why, by birth, they were superior to the other people. And that's why they gave themselves the title noble with a capital N. You don't write that with a small n. Okay, you write it with a capital N because they were blue blooded, right? You have to remember this point because this will come up at a later juncture when we are basically discussing uh, the way in the direction in which the British Parliament went. So we have this whole idea of blue blood, and what you need to see is if we are looking at this particular thing, then um, the nobles considered themselves superior. Peers are supposed to be equals, but for the nobles, another noble was a peer. Okay, not uh, a non-noble. A non-noble was not a peer. Those who were nobles were peers. All right. So it was the nobles who were having a problem with the king. And this problem pertained to taxation and revenue sharing. The kings of England had become used to a very, very bad habit. The bad habit that they had was that they wanted more and more money. They had become greedy, and at that time, the economy was agrarian. Please remember that all feudal economies, the medieval period also coincides with the feudal period, and all feudal economies were agrarian. Okay, so as you are aware, agrarian economies are at the mercy of nature. So you can have famines, you can have floods, and adversities, or let's say weather adversities, impacted on the economies negatively. Okay, and if that had impacted negatively, then the ability to pay tax would become extremely difficult, right? So if you keep that in mind, uh, then what you will actually see is uh, it was the nobles who collected the taxes from the peasants by renting or leasing out their lands, and they were trying to catch the attention of the king and to tell him uh, that you cannot have this uniform taxation irrespective of how the situation is on the ground. If things are okay, fine, things are okay. But if things are not okay, then you have a problem. And therefore, uh, what they wanted was to speak to the king, and the king refused to speak to them. So it was at that particular time that they decided that they should create a platform from where they could speak to the king. And that is how, in so the parliament, this particular spelling was a corruption of the spelling that you found in the spelling that you found in um, French. Okay, so the parliament was founded, or rather formed, and this is where the peers or the nobles, they came together in order to discuss various different things. So when we are told that parliament is a democratic institution, we are only being told a partial truth. Okay, it's a partial truth because the parliament really became a properly democratic institution only in the 20th century. 10 centuries before that, when it was set up, it was not a, it wasn't a place uh, which was democratic at all. So the parliament, in its origins, it was feudal. It was a feudal institution meant for the feudal lords. Despite the formation of the parliament in 1066 CE, common era, you will find that the king still refused to speak to the parliament. When did the king speak to the parliament? The king spoke to the parliament finally because of a very adverse economic crisis. He spoke to them in, or agreed to speak to them in 1215 CE, and it was then that the Magna Carta was submitted to the king by the nobles. There are people in Osmania University who will begin their explanation of human rights with Magna Carta as one of the first uh, instances of assertion of human rights. That is complete rubbish. Human rights is a 19th century phenomenon, and it is something that should be talked about when you talk about Tom Paine, or Thomas Paine as he was called. Uh, he wrote that seminal work which was called Rights of Man, in which he argued that human beings by birth, because of the fact that they are human beings, have rights. That's what he said. So that is where the human rights, uh, language of human rights started. Otherwise, before him, it was natural rights that was talked about by people like Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and questioned by David Hume. Okay, and questioned by David Hume. But it was Tom Paine who specifically wrote this because of his differences with his once friend and another political philosopher, Edmund Burke. Okay, uh, I'm beginning to have this rotary vertigo again. So, if you don't mind, I'll stop here today. I will,
Okay, sir.
yeah, please
Okay,
don't
sir.
mind, but I don't think I can go on, and that vertigo is setting in. I can feel it coming. I don't want it to become like the morning. I'm sorry, it was very embarrassing in the morning. Uh, so we'll continue with this tomorrow at
Okay,
5:30.
sir.
Yes.
Akshay, can you? How many people have turned up? Very few people have turned up.
Nine people, sir.
Yeah.
Nine
So
members.
is it because of the fact that some of you saw me having this problem that you didn't come? Just find out, or if you want a different time. Uh, the same thing I would say to Prashant, Anirudh, Adesh. You also joined, right?
Yes, sir. Just
Adesh.
continuing. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So discuss amongst yourselves and tell me if you want another time. But another time will be too early It's I think we'll do this one more day and see. And if attendance continues to be like this, then we'll talk about it.
Okay,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. So thank you very much, and sorry that I'm finishing early. Uh, so I'll see you people tomorrow. I will post this video on the AVR Institute thread, the link to the video.
Okay, sir.
Okay, if anybody wants to check it, you can check it. So thank you very much. See you tomorrow.